October 14th, 2019. Willowbrook, Connecticut. The first frost of the season had arrived overnight. A thin layer of ice covered the courthouse steps, and the sky hung low and gray, like it was pressing down on the town itself. The kind of cold that gets into your bones. The kind of day that feels heavy before anything even happens. Inside Courtroom 4B, 200 people sat in complete silence. Not the polite silence of a church service. Not the bored silence of a waiting room. This was different. This was the silence of people holding their breath. The silence of people who knew they were about to witness something they would never forget. At the front of the room, behind a raised wooden bench that had seen 50 years of trials, sat Judge Harold Crane. 72 years old. Silver hair. Deep lines carved into his face from decades of handing down sentences. He had seen murderers. He had seen con artists. He had seen desperate people do desperate things. But in all his years on the bench, he had never seen anything quite like the defendant standing before him today. Her name was Elise Marbury. 17 years old. Blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Small frame. Delicate features. The kind of face you might see on a college brochure or a toothpaste commercial. She stood motionless at the defense table, her wrists bound by metal shackles that looked almost ridiculous on someone so young, so small, so ordinary. But there was nothing ordinary about what she had done. The jury had already delivered their verdict 3 days earlier. Guilty. First-degree murder. Premeditated. Calculated. Cold-blooded. Now it was time for sentencing. Judge Crane adjusted his glasses. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the paper in front of him. Everyone noticed. The man who had sentenced gang leaders without blinking was shaking because of a teenage girl. He cleared his throat. "Miss Marbury," he said, his voice rough, strained. "You have been found guilty of the murder of Cora Whitfield. A young woman who trusted you. A young woman who called you her best friend." He paused. Swallowed hard. "In my 43 years serving this court, I have encountered many forms of evil. But I have never encountered anything as disturbing as the calculated cruelty you displayed." Elise didn't move. Didn't blink. Her face was completely blank, like she was watching something mildly boring on television. "Given the premeditated nature of this crime," Judge Crane continued, "and the exceptional cruelty demonstrated, this court has no choice but to impose the maximum sentence allowed by law." The room seemed to shrink. The air became thick, almost impossible to breathe. "Elise Marbury, I hereby sentence you to death by lethal injection." The gavel came down. And then something happened that no one expected. Elise turned her head slightly. A small smile flickered across her lips. Not the nervous smile of someone in shock. Not the desperate smile of someone hoping for a last-minute miracle. This was something else entirely. She leaned toward the small microphone on the defense table. Her lawyer grabbed her arm, tried to pull her back, whispered something urgent in her ear. She shook him off like he was an annoying insect. The courtroom went impossibly still. When Elise spoke, her voice was calm, clear, almost pleasant, like she was answering a question in class. "Cora begged." Those 2 words hit the room like a physical blow. "She said my name over and over while she drowned. She kept reaching for me, like she thought I might still save her." A woman in the gallery let out a strangled sob. Linda Whitfield. Cora's mother. Her hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Elise continued, her voice never wavering. "I stood at the edge and watched. And I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing." Judge Crane's face went pale. The prosecutor, Diana Vance, gripped the edge of her table so hard her knuckles turned white. "The only thing I regret," Elise said, "is that I can't do it again." For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. A juror in the back row, a middle-aged woman with gray streaks in her hair, slumped forward and collapsed. People started screaming. Linda Whitfield let out a wail that sounded barely human. Reporters scrambled for the doors, desperate to be the first to break the story. But in the middle of all that chaos, Elise Marbury stood perfectly still. Her eyes scanned the room until they found Diana Vance, the prosecutor who had spent 6 months building the case against her. The woman who had torn apart every lie, every manipulation, every carefully constructed mask. And Elise smiled at her. Not a smirk. Not a grin. A genuine, satisfied smile. The smile of someone who had just won a game no one else knew they were playing. Because that's the thing about Elise Marbury. She didn't care about freedom. She didn't care about living or dying. What she cared about was being remembered. What she cared about was proving that she was smarter, sharper, and more significant than everyone else in that room. And with those few sentences, she had guaranteed that no one would ever forget her name. I know what you're thinking. How does a 17-year-old girl, an honor student, a volunteer, a chess champion, end up standing in a courtroom, sentenced to death, confessing to murder with a smile on her face? What could possibly turn someone with everything going for her into a cold-blooded killer? And what really happened to Cora Whitfield on that freezing night at Ashford Quarry? That's exactly what I'm going to tell you. But before we go back to the beginning, I want to ask you to do 2 quick things. First, if you're finding this story as compelling as I am, please hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Second, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers all around the world. All right, let's rewind. 18 months before that courtroom. Before the trial. Before the arrest. Before Cora's body was pulled from the icy waters of Ashford Quarry. Back to a time when Elise Marbury was still the golden girl. The perfect daughter. The best friend everyone wished they had. Back to a time when no one, not her teachers, not her parents, not even Cora herself, had any idea what was hiding behind those pretty blue eyes. Because here's the thing about monsters. They don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the girl next door. Sometimes they look like your best friend. Sometimes they sit beside you in homeroom, borrow your notes, and tell you everything is going to be okay. And by the time you realize what they really are, it's already too late. This is the story of Elise Marbury. The girl who had everything. The girl who wanted more. And the girl who was willing to kill to get it. Stay with me. Let me take you back to March 2018. 18 months before that courtroom. 18 months before the world learned the name Elise Marbury. Willowbrook High School. A sprawling red brick building surrounded by oak trees and perfectly manicured lawns. The kind of school you see in movies about small-town America. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where Friday night football games are practically religious events, and where reputation is everything. And at the very top of the social pyramid sat Elise Marbury. Picture this. The school auditorium is packed. 500 students crammed into folding seats. Teachers lining the walls. The principal standing at the podium, adjusting the microphone. It is my great honor, he says, to present this year's Outstanding Student Achievement Award to someone who truly embodies everything our school stands for. A spotlight swings toward the front row. Elise Marbury, please come to the stage. The applause is immediate, loud, genuine. 500 pairs of hands clapping for the girl who seemed to have it all. Elise stood up slowly, smoothed her skirt, tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. She walked to the stage with the kind of quiet confidence that most teenagers only dream about. No rushing. No nervousness. Just calm, steady steps, like she had done this 100 times before. Because she had. Debate team captain. Chess club president. Founder of the school's Mental Health Awareness Initiative. Volunteer at the Willowbrook Hospice, where she spent weekends reading to elderly patients. A 4.3 GPA. Early acceptance to Yale. On paper, Elise Marbury was perfect. She took the award, a small crystal trophy, and turned to face the crowd. Her smile was warm, humble. The kind of smile that made you feel like she was genuinely grateful, like she couldn't believe she had been chosen. "Thank you so much," she said into the microphone. "This means the world to me. But honestly, I couldn't have done any of this without the support of my amazing teachers, my incredible friends, and of course, my family." More applause. She glanced toward the front row, where her father, Gregory Marbury, sat with his arms crossed. He gave her a single nod. No smile. No warmth. Just acknowledgement. That's something you need to understand about Elisa's world. Gregory Marbury was one of the most successful defense attorneys in Connecticut. Wealthy. Powerful. Respected. He had built his career defending people who everyone else had already convicted in their minds. Drug dealers. White-collar criminals. Even a few murderers. He won more cases than he lost, and he never let anyone forget it. But at home, Gregory wasn't a hero. He was cold. Distant. Demanding. The kind of father who saw his daughter not as a child to nurture, but as a project to perfect. Every achievement was expected. Every failure was unacceptable. Love wasn't given freely in the Marbury household. It was earned. And Elise had learned early that the only way to earn her father's approval was to be the best. At everything. Always. So that's what she became. But here's what nobody saw. Behind that warm smile, behind those humble words, behind that carefully constructed image of the perfect student, there was something else. Something cold. While Elise stood on that stage, accepting her award, soaking in the applause, a different kind of thought was running through her mind. She wasn't thinking about how grateful she was. She wasn't thinking about her teachers or her friends or her family. She was thinking, look at all these idiots. Clapping for me like trained seals. They have no idea who I really am. And that's exactly how I want it. See, Elise had figured something out a long time ago. People are easy to manipulate. They want to believe in goodness. They want to believe that a pretty smile means a kind heart. They want to believe that success and virtue go hand in hand. And as long as you give them what they expect to see, they'll never bother looking any deeper. Elise had been performing her whole life. The loving daughter. The dedicated student. The caring friend. Every role played to perfection. Every mask carefully chosen for the occasion. And underneath all those masks, nothing. Or at least, nothing that most people would recognize as human. No empathy. No guilt. No genuine connection to anyone or anything. Just a vast, empty space where feelings were supposed to be. A void she had learned to fill with achievement, with control, with the quiet thrill of knowing she was smarter than everyone around her. Now, let me introduce you to someone else. Sitting in the third row of that auditorium, clapping louder than anyone, was a girl with curly brown hair and a smile so genuine it could light up a room. Cora Whitfield. Elise's best friend since the second grade. If Elise was ice, Cora was sunlight. If Elise was calculated, Cora was spontaneous. If Elise was a performance, Cora was completely, utterly real. She was the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday. The kind of person who stayed after school to help struggling classmates with their homework. The kind of person who adopted stray cats and wrote poetry about rainy days and believed, truly believed, that there was good in everyone. Including Elise. Especially Elise. Cora had known Elise longer than anyone. They had grown up together. Sleepovers. Summer camps. Shared secrets. Cora had seen Elise at her worst, crying after Gregory's harsh criticisms, struggling with the impossible pressure of being perfect. And Cora had always been there to comfort her, to reassure her, to remind her that she was enough. What Cora didn't understand was that Elise had never needed comfort. She had needed an audience. Every tear Elise had ever cried in front of Cora was calculated. Every vulnerable moment was a performance designed to strengthen Cora's loyalty. Elise didn't have friends. She had assets. People she could use, manipulate, and discard when they were no longer useful. And Cora, sweet, trusting, naive Cora, was her most valuable asset of all. Because Cora made Elise look human. Later that night, the two girls sat in Elise's bedroom. The crystal trophy was on the desk, catching the lamplight. Cora was sprawled across the bed, flipping through a college brochure. "You know what I love about you?" Cora said, looking up with a grin. Elise was sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair. "What? You never let any of this go to your head. Like most people with your achievements would be totally insufferable. But you're still just you. Elise smiled at her reflection. Thanks, Cor. That means a lot. I'm serious, Cora continued. You're going to do amazing things. We both are. Yale, here we come, right? Right, Elise said softly. But in the mirror, her smile didn't reach her eyes. Because Elise had already done the math. 2 girls. 2 applications. 2 dreams of Yale. But only 1 scholarship. And Elise Marbury didn't share. Let me tell you about the Whitfield Marbury Scholarship. It sounds prestigious, right? Like something out of a movie about prep schools and old money. And honestly, that's exactly what it was. 30 years ago, 2 families, the Whitfields and the Marburys, decided to create something that would cement their legacy in Willowbrook forever. They pooled their resources and established a full-ride scholarship to Yale University. Every year, 1 exceptional student from Willowbrook High would be chosen. Not based on need. Not based on connections. Based purely on merit. The best of the best. For 3 decades, this scholarship had launched careers. Doctors. Lawyers. CEOs. A congressman. 1 Pulitzer Prize winner. Getting the Whitfield Marbury Scholarship wasn't just about money. It was about prestige. It was about being chosen. It was about proving you were the absolute best your town had to offer. And for as long as she could remember, Elise Marbury had assumed that scholarship was hers. How could it not be? Her family's name was literally on the award. Her father sat on the selection committee. She had spent her entire life crafting the perfect resume, the perfect image, the perfect story. Every volunteer hour, every leadership position, every carefully chosen extracurricular activity, all of it was building toward this one moment. The scholarship was her destiny. Or so she thought. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late April when everything changed. Elise was sitting in the guidance counselor's office, reviewing her Yale application for the 100th time. Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman with reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose, was clicking through files on her computer. Elise, your application is outstanding, Mrs. Patterson said. Truly. One of the best I've ever seen. Elise smiled. Of course it was. But I do want to give you a heads up, Mrs. Patterson continued, her tone shifting slightly. There's another very strong candidate this year. Elise's smile froze. Who? Mrs. Patterson hesitated. I probably shouldn't say. Confidentiality and all that. But since you 2 are so close, I figured you might already know. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cora? Elise asked. Her voice was calm, but something flickered behind her eyes. Something cold. Mrs. Patterson nodded. Her application is remarkable, Elise. Her essay about her mother's cancer diagnosis and how it inspired her to pursue oncology research. It's incredibly moving. The committee was very impressed. Elise sat perfectly still. Inside, something was cracking. The committee hasn't made a final decision yet, Mrs. Patterson added quickly. You're both exceptional candidates. It could go either way. But Elise wasn't listening anymore. All she could hear was a dull roar in her ears. All she could see was red. Cora. Her best friend. Her shadow. Her accessory. Cora was trying to take what was hers. That night, Elise couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, running the numbers over and over in her mind. She had the better GPA. She had more leadership positions. She had more volunteer hours. On paper, she should be the obvious choice. But Cora had something Elise didn't have. A story. See, 2 years ago, Cora's mother, Linda, had been diagnosed with breast cancer. It was stage 3. Aggressive. Terrifying. 4 months, the Whitfield family had lived in a fog of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and sleepless nights. Cora had been devastated. But instead of falling apart, she had channeled her pain into purpose. She started volunteering at the oncology ward. She organized fundraisers for cancer research. She even started a support group for teenagers with sick parents. and she had written about all of it in her scholarship essay. Not for sympathy. Not for attention. Because that's who Cora was. She turned her pain into something beautiful, something helpful, something real. Elise didn't understand that. She couldn't understand that. To her, Cora's essay wasn't inspiring. It was a weapon. A calculated move to steal the scholarship through emotional manipulation. She's using her mother's cancer to beat me, Elise thought. She's exploiting her own family's tragedy to take what's mine. The irony was completely lost on her. Elise had spent her entire life manipulating emotions, crafting narratives, using people as props in her own story. But when someone else did something genuine, something that came from a place of real pain and real love, she could only see it through the lens of her own twisted worldview. She couldn't recognize authenticity because she had never experienced it. The next few weeks were torture. Every time Elise saw Cora, she felt a surge of something dark. Something she couldn't quite name. Not anger, exactly. Something colder. Something more dangerous. Cora, of course, noticed nothing. "I'm so nervous about the scholarship," Cora said one day at lunch, picking at her salad. "Like, what if neither of us gets it? What if they give it to some random person?" Elise forced a laugh. "That won't happen. We're the top candidates." "But what if we're competing against each other?" Cora looked up, her brown eyes filled with genuine concern. "That would be so weird, right? I don't want this to come between us." Elise reached across the table and squeezed Cora's hand. "Nothing could ever come between us," she said sweetly. "No matter what happens, we'll still be best friends. I promise." Cora smiled, relieved. "You're the best, Elise. Seriously. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You're about to find out," Elise thought. But on the outside, she just smiled back. The final decision came in June. Elise was at home when the email arrived. She saw the notification pop up on her phone, and her heart actually skipped a beat. For all her confidence, for all her certainty, there was a small part of her that was afraid. She opened the email. "Dear Miss Marbury, thank you for your outstanding application to the Whitfield Marbury Scholarship Program. After careful consideration, we regret to inform you that you have not been selected as this year's recipient." Elise stopped breathing. "We encourage you to apply again next year and wish you the best in your future endeavors." That was it. No explanation. No feedback. Just a form rejection that could have been sent to anyone. For a long moment, Elise just stared at the screen. Then she opened Instagram. And there it was. A photo of Cora, beaming, holding an acceptance letter. The caption read, "Dreams really do come true. So grateful and humbled to be this year's Whitfield Marbury Scholar. Thank you to everyone who believed in me." 300 likes already. Comments flooding in. "Congratulations. You deserve this so much. So proud of you." Elise stared at that photo for a very long time. The crack that had started in Mrs. Patterson's office spread wider, deeper, until something inside her finally broke. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't throw her phone across the room. She just sat there, perfectly still, as a single thought crystallized in her mind. "If I can't have it, neither can you." That night, Elise sat at her desk, her laptop open in front of her. The glow of the screen illuminated her face as her fingers moved across the keyboard. She typed, "Ashford Quarry Depth." Then, "How long does it take for a body to surface in cold water?" Then, "Accidental drowning statistics teenagers." Outside her window, the moon hung low and heavy in the sky. And somewhere across town, Cora Whitfield was celebrating the best day of her life. She had no idea it would be one of her last. Here's something you need to understand about Elise Marbury. She didn't do anything impulsively. Ever. While most teenagers acted on emotion, making decisions they'd regret 5 minutes later, Elise was different. She was methodical, patient, calculating, like a chess player who could see 20 moves ahead. And right now, she was planning the most important game of her life. The first few days after the scholarship announcement were brutal. Not because Elise was sad. She wasn't capable of sadness, not really. But she was furious. A cold, quiet fury that burned beneath her skin like dry ice. Every time someone congratulated Cora, every time she saw that photo on Instagram, every time her father looked at her with that mixture of disappointment and disdain, the fury grew stronger. Gregory Marbury hadn't said much when Elise told him she didn't get the scholarship. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. You failed. You're not good enough. You're not worthy of the Marbury name. For 17 years, Elise had worked to earn her father's approval. And in one moment, Cora Whitfield had taken it all away. But Elise wasn't going to let that stand. No. She was going to fix this. At first, she tried the subtle approach. Rumors. Elise had always been good at spreading information without leaving fingerprints. A whisper here. A concerned comment there. Nothing that could ever be traced back to her. It started small. I'm worried about Cora, Elise told a girl named Madison in the bathroom between classes. She's been acting really strange lately. Super stressed. I heard she's been having panic attacks. Madison's eyes went wide. Really? She seems fine to me. That's the thing about mental health, Elise said, lowering her voice. People hide it. I just hope she can handle the pressure of the scholarship. That's a lot for someone who's already struggling, you know. Within a week, the whispers had spread. Did you hear about Cora? Apparently she's falling apart. Someone said she's on medication. I heard she might defer her admission to Yale. Too much stress. But Cora didn't crumble. She was confused, sure. Hurt, even. She heard the rumors and couldn't understand where they were coming from. But she kept smiling, kept showing up, kept being her annoyingly resilient self. So Elise escalated. She sent an anonymous email to the scholarship committee. The subject line read, "Concerned student, possible application fraud." In the email, Elise alleged that Cora had fabricated some of her volunteer hours. She provided fake details, made updates, fictional inconsistencies. All of it designed to cast just enough doubt to trigger an investigation. For 3 agonizing weeks, Elise waited. She imagined the committee reviewing the claims, questioning Cora, revoking the scholarship in disgrace. She imagined the look on Cora's face when everything she had worked for was ripped away. It would be beautiful. But then the response came. The committee had investigated the allegations. They had verified every volunteer hour, every reference, every document, and they had found nothing. The email was dismissed as a malicious hoax. Elise read that response in her bedroom, her jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Fine, she thought. If I can't destroy her reputation, I'll have to be more direct. The idea came to her on a Thursday night. She was lying in bed, scrolling through old photos on her phone, when she came across a picture from freshman year. Her and Cora at Ashford Quarry. They were sitting on the rocks near the edge, legs dangling over the water, huge smiles on their faces. It was their spot. They had discovered it together back when they were 14. A hidden swimming hole about 3 miles outside of town. Locals knew about it, but it was never crowded. Just a beautiful, secluded spot surrounded by woods, with a deep pool of cold, clear water at the bottom of the cliffs. Elise zoomed in on the photo, specifically on the drop behind them. 40 feet, at least. Maybe more. Jagged rocks lining the sides. And at the bottom, water so deep you couldn't see the bottom even on the sunniest day. A memory surfaced. Cora clutching Elise's arm that day, refusing to look over the edge. Her face pale. Her voice shaky. I hate heights, Cora had said. Like, seriously. They make me want to throw up. Elise remembered laughing, telling Cora she was being dramatic. But Cora had been dead serious. She wouldn't go anywhere near the edge. Made Elise promise they would stay far back from the drop. She's terrified of heights, Elise thought now, staring at the photo. And just like that, the plan began to take shape. Over the next 2 weeks, Elise became obsessed. She researched everything. She spent hours reading about drowning. How the body sinks at first, then rises after gases build up. How cold water slows decomposition. How long it takes for someone to be found, depending on the location. She studied Ashford Quarry like she was preparing for an exam. The depth of the water. The currents. The lack of cell phone reception. The fact that it was off the main road, hidden by trees, with no security cameras for miles. She looked up statistics on accidental drownings among teenagers. Learned how common they were. How often they were ruled accidents without a full investigation. How easy it was to fall from a slippery rock, especially at night, especially after rain. And she made notes. Not on her phone. Not on her computer. She wasn't stupid. She used a small notebook that she kept hidden in a hollowed-out textbook on her shelf. Every detail. Every contingency. Every possible thing that could go wrong, and how she would handle it. She even practiced. Late at night, when her father was asleep, she would drive out to the quarry alone. Walk the paths. Memorize the terrain. Stand at the edge and look down into the darkness, imagining what it would sound like when Cora hit the water. Splash. Silence. Done. The hardest part was acting normal. Every day, Elise had to look at Cora and smile. Had to hug her. Had to pretend that everything was fine. That she was happy for her best friend. That she wasn't counting down the days until she pushed her off a cliff. It was exhausting, but also thrilling. There was a secret power in knowing something that no one else knew. Walking through the hallways, sitting in class, eating lunch with Cora, all while carrying this dark, delicious secret inside her. You have no idea, she would think, watching Cora laugh at some stupid joke. You have no idea what's coming. Sometimes, Elise would catch herself smiling at inappropriate moments. A small, private smile that had nothing to do with whatever was happening around her. A smile that came from deep inside, from that cold, empty place where normal people kept their conscience. She was going to do this. She was really going to do this. And no one would ever know. The final piece of the puzzle came on a Wednesday afternoon. Elise checked the weather forecast. Rain predicted for Friday night. Heavy rain. The kind that would make rocks slippery. The kind that would explain a tragic accident. She pulled out her notebook and wrote the date. Friday, September 7th. Then she picked up her phone and texted Cora. Hey, I know things have been weird between us lately. I think we should talk. Clear the air. Can we meet at the quarry Friday night? Just like old times. I miss you. The response came 2 minutes later. Elise. Yes. I've been feeling the distance too. Friday works. I'll bring snacks. Can't wait to hang out like we used to. Love you. Elise stared at those words. Love you. She felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. She typed back. Love you too. See you Friday. Then she closed her notebook, slid it back into its hiding place, and went downstairs for dinner. Her father was talking about a case. Her mother was pouring wine. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. And in 3 days, Cora Whitfield would be dead. Friday, September 7th. The rain started around 6 p.m. Not a drizzle. Not a light shower. This was the kind of rain that hammered against windows and turned streets into rivers. The kind of rain that made people cancel plans and stay inside. But Elise wasn't canceling anything. She stood at her bedroom window, watching the water pour down the glass, and felt something she rarely felt. Excitement. Real, genuine excitement. Tonight was the night. After weeks of planning, weeks of waiting, weeks of pretending, it was finally happening. In a few hours, everything would change. The scholarship wouldn't matter anymore. Nothing would matter anymore. Because Cora Whitfield would be gone. And Elise Marbury would be free. She got dressed carefully. Dark jeans. A black hoodie. Old sneakers she wouldn't mind throwing away. Nothing flashy. Nothing memorable. Just clothes that would blend into the darkness. She checked herself in the mirror one last time. Her face was calm. Composed. The same face she wore to school every day. The same face she wore when she accepted awards, when she comforted friends, when she lied through her teeth with a smile. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "You've planned for everything. Just stay calm and follow the script." She grabbed her car keys and headed downstairs. Gregory was in his study, buried in case files. Her mother was at a charity event. Nobody asked where she was going. Nobody cared. That was the nice thing about having distant parents. No questions. The drive to Ashford Quarry took about 20 minutes. 20 minutes of dark roads, heavy rain, and windshield wipers struggling to keep up. Elise drove slowly, carefully. The last thing she needed was to get pulled over or get into an accident. Not tonight. She had texted Cora earlier, confirming their plans. "Still on for tonight?" Cora had responded immediately. "Of course. I'm so excited. Feels like forever since we hung out just the two of us. See you at 8. Elise had smiled when she read that message. Forever, she thought. You have no idea. She arrived at the quarry first. That was intentional. She parked her car in a small clearing about half a mile from the main spot, hidden by trees, invisible from the road. Then she walked the rest of the way, using her phone's flashlight to navigate the muddy path. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle by now. The air smelled like wet earth and pine needles. Every step made a squelching sound as her sneakers sank into the soft ground. By the time she reached the quarry, she was soaked. But she didn't care. She stood at the edge and looked down. The water was black. Completely black. No moonlight could penetrate the thick clouds overhead. The only sound was the rain hitting the surface, creating thousands of tiny ripples that disappeared as quickly as they formed. 40 feet down. Maybe more. Elise picked up a rock and tossed it over the edge. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Splash. She smiled. Cora arrived at 8:15. Elise heard her before she saw her. The crunch of footsteps on gravel, the beam of a flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Elise? You here?" "Over here," Elise called out, waving her phone light. Cora emerged from the tree line, her curly brown hair plastered to her face, a huge grin spreading across her features. "Oh my God, this weather is insane!" she laughed, jogging toward Elise. "I can't believe we're actually doing this. It's like old times." Elise opened her arms and hugged her. Cora smelled like vanilla shampoo and rain. She was warm against Elise's cold body. Her arms wrapped around Elise's waist, squeezing tight. "I miss this," Cora murmured into Elise's shoulder. "I missed us." "Me too," Elise said softly. And for just a moment, just the briefest flicker of a moment, something stirred inside her. A memory. A feeling. Something that might have been guilt, or affection, or regret. But then it was gone. Buried beneath the cold emptiness that had always defined her. They sat on a large flat rock, about 10 feet from the edge. Cora had brought snacks, just like she promised. Chocolate chip cookies. A thermos of hot cocoa. 2 plastic cups. "I made the cocoa myself," Cora said proudly, pouring. "My mom's secret recipe. Extra marshmallows." Elise took the cup and wrapped her hands around it. The warmth felt good against her frozen fingers. "Thanks, Cor. This is nice." "It really is." Cora sighed contentedly, looking out at the darkness. "I know things have been weird between us lately. With the scholarship and everything. I just want you to know, I never wanted to compete with you. You're my best friend. That means more to me than any award." Elise nodded slowly. "I know. And I'm sorry if I made you feel like I was rubbing it in or something. That was never my intention. I was just excited, you know. But I should have been more sensitive about how you were feeling." "It's okay," Elise said. "Really. I'm happy for you." Cora's face lit up. "You mean it." "Of course." Cora reached over and squeezed Elise's hand. Her fingers were warm, soft, trusting. "I love you, Elise. You're like a sister to me. I don't know what I'd do without you." Elise squeezed back. You won't have to find out. They talked for another hour. About school. About Yale. About the future. About all the plans they had made together since they were kids. Cora did most of the talking. She always did. She talked about how she wanted to find a cure for cancer someday. How she wanted to make her mom proud. How she hoped they could be roommates at Yale, even though freshmen usually got assigned randomly. Elise listened. She nodded at the right moments, laughed at the right jokes, said all the right things. But inside, she was watching the clock, waiting, planning. The rain had stopped completely now. The clouds were starting to thin, and every few minutes, a sliver of moonlight would break through, illuminating the quarry with an eerie silver glow. It was almost time. Hey, Elise said suddenly, standing up. Remember that photo we took freshman year? The one at the edge. Cora looked up, confused. Yeah. We should recreate it. For old time's sake. One last picture before everything changes. Cora hesitated. I don't know, Elise. You know I hate heights. And those rocks look super slippery. Come on, Elise said, reaching out her hand. I'll be right there with you. Just one quick photo. Then we can go. Cora bit her lip. Please. Elise added, making her eyes soft, innocent. It would mean so much to me. That did it. Cora could never say no when Elise looked at her like that. Okay, she said, taking Elise's hand. But just one photo. And we stay far back from the edge. Of course, Elise said, pulling her to her feet. I would never let anything happen to you. They walked toward the cliff's edge together. The rocks were slick with rain, just as Elise had anticipated. Every step required careful balance. Cora gripped Elise's hand tightly, her breath coming in short, nervous bursts. This is far enough, Cora said when they were about 5 feet from the edge. I can't go any closer. Just a little more, Elise said gently. The lighting's better over here. Trust me. Elise, I really don't. Trust me. Something in Elise's voice made Cora stop protesting. She took another step. Then another. Now they were 3 feet from the edge. 2 feet. The darkness yawned beneath them, vast and hungry. Elise pulled out her phone. Okay, smile. Cora turned toward the camera, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. Elise, I want to go back now. Please. Just one more second. Elise. Cora turned to look at her friend. And in that moment, she saw something she had never seen before. The mask was gone. Elise's face was blank. Completely blank. No warmth. No friendship. No humanity at all. Just cold, empty eyes staring at her with something that looked almost like curiosity. Elise. Cora whispered. What's wrong? You're scaring me. Elise tilted her head slightly. Goodbye, Cora. And then she pushed. It happened so fast. 1 second, Cora was standing there. The next, she was falling. Her arms pinwheeled. Her mouth opened in a scream that seemed to last forever. Elise. The sound of her name echoed off the rocks. Then came the splash. And then, silence. Elise stood at the edge, looking down. The water was still again. Dark and smooth, like nothing had happened. She waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 3. No splashing. No coughing. No gasping for air. Just silence. She took a deep breath. Then she pulled out her phone, wiped it clean with her sleeve, and opened the camera app. She checked her reflection, adjusting her expression. Fuck. Horror. Grief. Perfect. She practiced the 911 call in her head. My friend fell. Oh God, she fell. We were taking pictures and she slipped. Please, you have to help her. Please. She dialed the number. And as the operator answered, Elise Marbury began to cry. The next few hours were chaos. Paramedics. Police cars. Flashing red and blue lights cutting through the darkness. Voices shouting. Radios crackling. Flashlight beams sweeping across the quarry like searchlights in a prison movie. And in the middle of it all, sitting on the back of an ambulance with a shock blanket wrapped around her shoulders, was Elise Marbury. Crying. Shaking. The picture of devastation. A female paramedic crouched beside her, offering tissues and gentle reassurances. 2 police officers stood nearby, talking in low voices, occasionally glancing in Elise's direction with sympathetic expressions. Nobody suspected a thing. I tried to grab her, Elise sobbed, her voice breaking at all the right moments. She slipped and I reached for her hand, but I couldn't. I couldn't hold on. It happened so fast. It's not your fault, sweetheart, the paramedic said softly, rubbing Elise's back. These rocks are treacherous, especially after rain. It was an accident. A terrible accident. Elise nodded, burying her face in her hands. Inside, she felt nothing. No guilt. No remorse. No sadness. Just a quiet satisfaction that everything was going according to plan. The dive team found Cora's body 3 hours later. She was at the bottom of the quarry, 47 feet down. The water was so cold that her skin had already started to turn blue. Her eyes were open, frozen in an expression of pure terror. The last thing she ever saw was her best friend's face. The last word she ever spoke was Elise's name. But nobody would ever know that. As far as anyone could tell, Cora Whitfield had died in a tragic accident. A slip on wet rocks. A fall in the darkness. A young life cut short by cruel misfortune. Case closed. Or so everyone thought. The funeral was held 5 days later. The whole town showed up. Willowbrook Baptist Church was packed to capacity, with people standing in the aisles and spilling out onto the front steps. Cora Whitfield had touched a lot of lives. Teachers, classmates, neighbors, the elderly patients from the hospital where she volunteered. Everyone had a story. Everyone had a memory. Everyone had tears. And sitting in the front row, right next to the Whitfield family, was Elise Marbury. She wore a simple black dress. No makeup. Her hair pulled back in a modest ponytail. She looked exhausted, fragile, like she hadn't slept in days. Which, of course, was intentional. Elise had practiced this look in the mirror for hours. When it came time for the eulogies, Elise was the first to speak. She walked to the podium slowly, her legs seemingly weak, her hands trembling as she unfolded a piece of paper. She looked out at the crowd, hundreds of tear-streaked faces looking back at her, and took a shaky breath. Cora was my best friend. Her voice cracked on the word, friend. She paused, wiped her eyes, continued. We met in 2nd grade. She was the new girl, and I remember she was wearing this ridiculous rainbow backpack that was almost as big as she was. A few sad smiles in the audience. She walked right up to me at lunch and said, "Hi, I'm Cora. Do you want to be friends?" Just like that. No hesitation. No fear. That was Cora. She never waited for life to happen to her. She went out and grabbed it. Elise paused again, her chin quivering. We were supposed to go to Yale together. We were supposed to be roommates. We had this whole plan. We were going to study together, graduate together, change the world together. A sob escaped her throat. The audience was weeping openly now. But now I have to do it without her. And I don't know how. I don't know how to exist in a world where Cora isn't there to make everything better. She looked up at the ceiling, as if addressing Cora directly. I miss you so much. I miss your laugh. I miss your terrible jokes. I miss the way you could make anyone feel special just by listening to them. You were the best person I ever knew, Cor. And I promise I will live my life in a way that would make you proud. She folded the paper, pressed it to her heart, and walked back to her seat. The church erupted in quiet sobs. Linda Whitfield reached over and squeezed Elise's hand. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "That was beautiful. Cora loved you so much." Elise squeezed back, her eyes still glistening with manufactured tears. I loved her too. After the funeral, there was a reception at the Whitfield home. Casseroles and condolences. Hugs and handshakes. The awkward ritual of collective grief. Elise played her role perfectly. She hugged everyone who offered. She accepted every sympathy with grace and humility. She helped Linda in the kitchen, washing dishes, refilling drinks, doing all the things a supportive best friend would do. But while her hands were busy, her eyes were watching. Specifically, she was watching Linda. There was something in the way Cora's mother looked at her. Something Elise couldn't quite identify. It wasn't suspicion, exactly. But it wasn't pure grief either. It was attention. Like Linda was studying her, cataloging her reactions, waiting for something. It made Elise uneasy, but she pushed the feeling aside. Linda was a grieving mother. Her daughter had just died. Of course she was acting strange. It didn't mean anything. It couldn't mean anything. As the reception wound down, Elise excused herself to use the bathroom. She closed the door, locked it, and finally let the mask drop. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was tired. Dark circles under her eyes. Cheeks raw from wiping away fake tears. But her eyes were calm, clear, satisfied. You did it, she thought. You actually did it. And no one suspects a thing. She had attended the funeral of the girl she murdered. She had delivered a eulogy that made everyone cry. She had comforted the grieving mother. It was her masterpiece. She smiled at her reflection, a real smile, the kind she only allowed herself when no one was watching, and felt a surge of something almost like joy. She was untouchable. She was invisible. She was... A knock on the door made her jump. "Just a minute," she called out, quickly rearranging her face back into grief. She flushed the toilet for effect, ran the water, and opened the door. Linda Whitfield was standing there. "Oh, Mrs. Whitfield," Elise said, placing a hand on her chest. "You startled me." Linda didn't smile. She didn't move aside. "We need to talk, Elise." Something cold slithered down Elise's spine. "Of course," she said carefully. "What about?" Linda's eyes were red-rimmed but sharp. Sharper than Elise had expected. "I found something in Cora's room. Something I think you should see." Linda led Elise to Cora's bedroom. The room was exactly as Cora had left it. Posters on the walls. Books stacked on the desk. A corkboard covered with photos, ticket stubs, and handwritten notes. It smelled like her. For just a moment, Elise felt something flicker inside her. Not guilt. Something more like nostalgia. A phantom ache for something she had never really felt. Then it was gone. Linda walked to the desk and picked up a small notebook with a floral cover. "This is Cora's journal," she said quietly. "She wrote in it every day. I've been reading it since she passed." Elise's heart began to beat faster. She hadn't accounted for this. "Most of it is normal stuff," Linda continued. "School, boys, dreams about the future." She paused, her finger marking a page. "But the last few entries, they're different." She opened the journal and began to read. September 3rd. "I don't know what's happening with Elise lately. She's been acting weird ever since the scholarship announcement. Cold. Distant. Sometimes she looks at me like she doesn't even see me. Like she's looking through me. It scares me. I don't know what I did wrong." Elise kept her face perfectly still. "Mrs. Whitfield, Linda held up a hand, cutting her off. She flipped to another page. September 6th. "Elise texted me tonight. She wants to meet at the quarry tomorrow, just the two of us. She says she misses me and wants to make things right. I'm relieved. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe everything is okay. I really hope so. I love Elise. I don't want to lose her." Linda closed the journal slowly. Her eyes met Elise's. "The quarry was your idea. It wasn't a question." Elise swallowed. I just wanted to talk. To clear the air. I never thought. My daughter was afraid of heights, Elise. She had been since she was a child. She would never have gone near that edge willingly. The rocks were slippery. She lost her balance. I tried to. I know what you told the police. Linda's voice was steady now. Dangerous. But I knew my daughter. And something about this doesn't feel right. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Elise's mind raced, calculating responses, measuring risks. This was unexpected. This was a variable she hadn't planned for. But she could handle it. She could handle anything. Mrs. Whitfield, she said softly, letting her voice tremble just slightly. I understand. You're grieving. You want answers. And I wish I could give them to you. But what happened that night was an accident. A horrible, tragic accident. And I have to live with that for the rest of my life. She reached out and took Linda's hand. I loved Cora. She was like a sister to me. I would never ever do anything to hurt her. Linda looked at their joined hands. Then she looked at Elise's face. Something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, perhaps. Or maybe just exhaustion. I want to believe you, she said finally. I really do. Then believe me, Elise whispered. Please. Linda pulled her hand away. I think you should go now, Elise. I need to be alone. Elise nodded, her face a perfect mask of understanding. Of course. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Whitfield. For everything. She walked to the door, paused, and looked back. Cora was lucky to have a mother like you. Then she left. Outside, the autumn air was cool and crisp. Elise walked to her car, her heels clicking on the driveway. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was calm. But inside, something had shifted. Linda Whitfield wasn't going to let this go. The journal entries. The questions. The suspicion in her eyes. This wasn't over. Elise climbed into her car and sat in the darkness for a long moment. It doesn't matter, she told herself. There's no evidence. No witnesses. Nothing that can connect you to what really happened. But for the first time since that night at the quarry, a small seed of doubt took root in her chest. What if she had missed something? What if she wasn't as untouchable as she thought? She started the car and pulled out of the driveway. In the rearview mirror, she could see Linda standing at the window, watching her go. Linda Whitfield couldn't sleep. Every night since the funeral, she would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the same questions over and over in her mind. Why did Cora go to the quarry at night? Why would she go anywhere near that edge when she was terrified of heights? And why did Elise's story feel so rehearsed? She had tried to let it go. Her husband, Richard, kept telling her that grief does strange things to the mind. That she was looking for someone to blame because accepting the randomness of tragedy was too painful. Maybe he was right. But Linda had been a mother for 18 years. She knew her daughter better than anyone. And every instinct she had was screaming that something was wrong. So on a cold Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Cora's death, Linda Whitfield walked into the Willowbrook Police Department. She wasn't leaving until someone listened. Detective Marcus Cole was not having a good day. 54 years old. Divorced twice. A bad knee from an old football injury that flared up every time it rained. He had been counting down the days until retirement, just 18 months to go, and had no interest in taking on complicated cases that would keep him up at night. But when he saw Linda Whitfield sitting in the waiting area, clutching a floral notebook to her chest like it was a life preserver, something shifted inside him. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, that desperate, haunted look of a mother who had lost everything. Or maybe it was the photograph on his own desk, a picture of his daughter, Emily, who was just a year younger than Cora had been. Whatever the reason, Marcus Cole found himself inviting Linda into his office and closing the door. "Tell me everything," he said. And she did. Linda talked for over an hour. She told him about Cora's fear of heights, about the journal entries expressing unease about Elise, about the scholarship rivalry and the strange shift in their friendship over the past few months. She told him about the quarry, how it had been Elise's idea to meet there. How Cora would never have gone near that edge willingly. How the whole thing felt staged, scripted, wrong. And she told him about the look in Elise's eyes at the funeral. The way she delivered that eulogy without a single genuine emotion. The way she squeezed Linda's hand like she was performing a scene in a play. "I know how this sounds," Linda said, her voice cracking. "I know I sound like a crazy, grieving mother looking for conspiracies. But I knew my daughter, detective. And I know when something doesn't add up." Cole leaned back in his chair, studying the journal in front of him. The official investigation had been straightforward. Accidental drowning. 2 teenagers taking photos in a dangerous location after dark. One slips, falls, tragically dies. It happened more often than people realized. Case closed. But Cole had learned a long time ago to trust his gut. And right now, his gut was telling him to dig deeper. "I'm not making any promises, Mrs. Whitfield," he said carefully. "But I'll take another look. Quietly. No guarantees." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "That's all I'm asking. Just look." Cole started with the basics. He pulled the original case file and read through every page. The responding officer's notes. The paramedics' report. The dive team's findings. Everything matched Elise's account perfectly. Too perfectly. That was the first thing that bothered him. In his experience, genuine trauma made people unreliable witnesses. They forgot details. They contradicted themselves. Their timelines got fuzzy. It was normal. The brain struggled to process shock and create coherent memories at the same time. But Elise's statement was crystal clear. Every detail accounted for. Every moment described with precision. Like she had rehearsed it. Maybe she's just a composed kid, Cole thought. Some people handle stress better than others. But he made a note anyway. Next, he looked into Elise Marbury herself. On the surface, everything checked out. Honor student. Community volunteer. No disciplinary issues. No criminal record. Not even a parking ticket. But Cole had been a detective for 23 years. He knew that the cleanest surfaces often hid the dirtiest secrets. He requested Elise's social media records through the proper legal channels. It took a week, but eventually the files arrived. Most of it was normal. Photos of friends. Inspirational quotes. Updates about school events. But buried in the data was something interesting. Her browser history from the week before Cora's death. Ashford Quarry depth. How long does it take for a body to surface in cold water? Accidental drowning statistics teenagers. Can police tell if someone was pushed off a cliff? Cole stared at the screen for a long time. His coffee went cold. His hands started to shake. Jesus Christ, he thought. This kid actually did it. But browser history wasn't enough. Any half-decent defense attorney would argue that Elise was just morbidly curious. That she searched those terms after Cora's death, not before. That it was a teenager's attempt to understand what had happened to her friend. Cole needed more. He pulled out his notebook and started making a list of potential witnesses. Anyone who might have seen something that night. Anyone who might have information that wasn't in the original report. The quarry was isolated, but not entirely deserted. There was a campground about half a mile east. A hiking trail that ran along the ridge. And a service road that maintenance crews used occasionally. Maybe someone had been there that night. Maybe someone had seen something. It was a long shot, but Cole had built his career on long shots. 3 days later, he found Earl Briggs. Earl was what polite society called unhoused. 67 years old. Gray beard. Weathered face. A Vietnam veteran who had fallen through the cracks of a system that didn't care about broken soldiers. He lived in the woods near Ashford Quarry. Had for years. Built himself a little shelter out of tarps and fallen branches. Kept to himself. Bothered no one. Cole found him sitting on a log near his campsite, whittling a piece of wood with a pocket knife. "Mr. Briggs? I'm Detective Marcus Cole, Willowbrook PD. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Earl looked up, his eyes sharp despite his ragged appearance. "About the girl who died?" Cole blinked. "You know about that?" "Hard not to. Heard the sirens. Saw the lights. Watched them pull her out of the water." Earl shook his head slowly. "Shame. She was young. Real young." Cole crouched down to Earl's level. "Were you near the quarry that night? Before the emergency crews arrived?" Earl was quiet for a moment, his knife pausing mid-stroke. "I was." "Did you see anything?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I heard things." Cole's heart began to pound. "What kind of things?" Earl set down the wood and looked directly at Cole. "Voices. 2 girls. Talking. Then arguing. One of them sounded scared. Real scared." "Could you hear what they were saying?" "Not the words. Just the tones. One voice was calm. Too calm. The other was panicked. Begging." "What happened next?" Earl's face darkened. "A scream. Short. Cut off real fast. Then a splash." He paused, his eyes distant. "Then nothing. Just the rain." Cole leaned in closer. "Is there anything else? Anything at all?" Earl nodded slowly. "After the splash, I heard something that stuck with me. The calm voice, the one that wasn't screaming." She laughed. Cole felt ice creep up his spine. Laughed. Just for a second. Real quiet. Like she had just told herself a joke nobody else would understand. Earl looked at Cole, his eyes haunted. "I've heard a lot of things in my life, detective. Seen a lot of bad stuff. But that laugh, that wasn't the sound of someone watching their friend fall by accident." He shook his head. "That was the sound of someone who got exactly what they wanted." Cole drove back to the station in silence. His mind was racing, pieces clicking into place like a puzzle he didn't want to solve. The browser history. The journal entries. The witness testimony. It was all circumstantial. No physical evidence. No confession. No smoking gun. But together, it painted a picture that made Cole's stomach turn. Elise Marbury had planned this. Every detail. Every contingency. Every lie. She had lured her best friend to that quarry, pushed her off a cliff, and then played the grieving survivor so convincingly that everyone, the police, the town, even Cora's own family, had believed her. She was 17 years old. And she was a monster. But Cole knew he had to be careful. Elise's father was Gregory Marbury, one of the most powerful defense attorneys in the state. If Cole made a move without airtight evidence, the whole case would collapse. Gregory would destroy him in court, and Elise would walk free. He needed more. He needed to find something Elise didn't know existed. Something she couldn't explain away. He picked up his phone and called the cybercrimes unit. "I need a warrant for a laptop," he said. "And I need it fast." Somewhere across town, Elise Marbury was sitting in her bedroom, scrolling through Instagram, completely unaware that her perfect crime was starting to unravel. She had been so careful, so meticulous, so confident. But she had made a mistake. Actually, she had made several. And Detective Marcus Cole was going to find every single one. "Now, before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Are you hooked? Because we're just getting started. If you're watching this and you can't wait to see what happens next, do me a favor. Hit that share button. Send this to someone who loves a good psychological thriller. Let them experience this story the way you are, one twist at a time. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed, because trust me, the best is yet to come." "All right. Let's keep going." Elise felt it before she understood it. A shift in the air. A subtle change in the way people looked at her. Nothing obvious. Nothing she could point to and say, "There, that's the problem." Just a feeling. It started about a month after the funeral. She was walking through the school hallway, same as always, when she noticed a group of girls near the lockers go quiet as she passed. Their conversation stopped mid-sentence. Their eyes followed her. Then, the moment she was out of earshot, the whispering started again. Elise kept walking. "It's nothing," she told herself. "People are still processing what happened. They don't know how to act around you. That's normal." But it happened again at lunch. And again in chemistry class. And again after school, when she saw her debate coach talking with the principal, both of them glancing in her direction with expressions she couldn't quite read. Something was happening. Something she wasn't controlling. And Elise Marbury did not like things she couldn't control. Then came the car. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about 3 weeks after her conversation with Linda. Elise was leaving school, walking toward the student parking lot, when she noticed an unmarked sedan parked across the street. Dark blue. Tinted windows. Nondescript. The kind of car that was designed not to be noticed. But Elise noticed everything. She kept walking, her pace unchanged, her face neutral. She climbed into her own car, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. The sedan didn't follow. But when she drove past, she caught a glimpse of the man behind the wheel. Middle-aged. Gray hair. Hard eyes. He was watching her. The next day, the car was back. Same spot. Same man. Same watchful eyes. This time, Elise took a different route home, a longer way, through residential streets and back roads. She checked her mirror constantly, looking for headlights that stayed too close for too long. Nothing. The sedan didn't follow. But it was there again the next morning. And the morning after that. Someone was keeping tabs on her. And Elise had a pretty good idea who. That night, she did something she had never done before. She confronted her father. Gregory Marbury was in his study, as usual, surrounded by legal briefs and half-empty whiskey glasses. He barely looked up when Elise knocked on the doorframe. "What is it?" "There's a car outside my school," Elise said, keeping her voice steady. "An unmarked sedan. It's been there every day this week." Gregory's pen paused. "Describe it." "Dark blue. Tinted windows. Driver is middle-aged, gray hair. Looks like a cop." Gregory set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "Have you done anything I should know about?" The question hung in the air between them. He suspects, Elise thought. Or at least, he's wondering. "No," she said firmly. "I haven't done anything. But someone is watching me, and I want to know why." Gregory studied her for a long moment. His eyes were cold. Calculating. The same eyes Elise saw in her own mirror every day. "I'll make some calls," he said finally. "Find out what's going on." "Thank you, Elise." She stopped at the door. "If there's something you need to tell me, anything at all, now is the time. I can't protect you if I don't know what I'm protecting you from." Elise met his gaze without flinching. "There's nothing to tell, Dad. Cora's death was an accident. I've said that 100 times. I don't know why anyone would think otherwise." Gregory held her stare for a beat too long. Then he nodded. "Close the door on your way out." The next morning, Gregory had answers. "His name is Marcus Cole," he said over breakfast, not looking up from his newspaper. "Detective with the Willowbrook PD. Apparently, Linda Whitfield convinced him to take another look at the case." Elise's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Another look? She doesn't believe it was an accident. She's been pushing for a reinvestigation. That's ridiculous. There's nothing to investigate. Gregory finally looked at her. "Then you have nothing to worry about, do you?" Elise forced herself to take a bite of cereal. To chew. To swallow. "No," she said calmly. "I don't." But inside, her mind was racing. What does he have? What could he possibly have? She had been so careful. So meticulous. She had planned every detail, anticipated every variable. But she hadn't anticipated Linda. She hadn't anticipated a mother's refusal to accept the unacceptable. And now, because of that oversight, a detective was circling her like a shark that had caught the scent of blood. Elise knew she needed to act, not react. If Detective Cole was investigating, then he was looking for evidence. Witnesses. Inconsistencies. Anything that could poke holes in her story. She needed to know exactly what he had, and more importantly, what he didn't have. But she also needed to be smart about it. Any sudden moves, any obvious attempts to cover her tracks, would only make things worse. Cole was clearly suspicious already. If she gave him a reason to dig deeper, he would. So instead of panicking, Elise did what she did best. She calculated. Step 1. Create a distraction. If Cole was looking for a killer, she needed to give him another suspect. Someone plausible. Someone with means, motive, and opportunity. And she had the perfect candidate. His name was Jerry Rowan. 52 years old. A handyman who did odd jobs around Willowbrook. He had a record, 2 DUIs and a misdemeanor assault charge from a bar fight 15 years ago. He was rough around the edges, kept to himself, and had done some work at the Whitfield house a few months before Cora's death. More importantly, he had no alibi for that night. Or so Elise assumed. The plan was simple. Elise still had one of Cora's bracelets, a delicate silver chain with a small heart charm. Cora had lent it to her months ago and never asked for it back. All Elise had to do was plant it somewhere connected to Jerry. His truck. His toolbox. His house. Anywhere the police might look. It wouldn't be conclusive evidence on its own, but it would be enough to shift suspicion. Enough to make Cole look in another direction. Enough to buy her time. She drove to Jerry's house on a Thursday evening, after dark. He lived in a small, run-down cottage on the outskirts of town. No fence. No security cameras. No neighbors close enough to notice a teenage girl slipping through the shadows. Elise parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from excitement. The same thrill she had felt at the quarry. The same rush of power that came from bending reality to her will. She found Jerry's truck parked in the driveway. The door was unlocked, because of course it was. People in small towns were trusting like that. She slipped the bracelet under the passenger seat, wiping it clean of her prints first. Then she walked away, calm and unhurried, like she was just taking an evening stroll. By the time she got home, she was already rehearsing the anonymous tip she would call in to the police. I saw Jerry Rowan near the quarry that night. He was acting strange. I think you should take a closer look at him. It was perfect. Untraceable. Foolproof. Except it wasn't. Because Elise Marbury, for all her intelligence, for all her careful planning, had made a critical miscalculation. She didn't know that on the night Cora died, Jerry Rowan was sitting in a holding cell at the county jail. He had been picked up for a DUI around 7 p.m., more than an hour before Elise even arrived at the quarry. He spent the entire night in lockup, surrounded by deputies and security cameras. His alibi wasn't just solid. It was airtight. 2 days later, Detective Cole received an anonymous tip about Jerry Rowan. He listened carefully, thanked the caller, and hung up. Then he pulled Jerry's file and made one phone call to the county jail. What time was Rowan booked on September 7th? 6:47 p.m., the clerk replied. Released the following morning at 8:15. Cole smiled grimly. Someone was trying to frame Jerry Rowan. And there was only one person with a reason to do that. Cole leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. The picture was getting clearer now. Elise Marbury wasn't just a murderer. She was an active threat. Still scheming. Still manipulating. Still trying to escape justice. He had been planning to move slowly, build his case carefully, make sure everything was airtight before making a move. But this changed things. If Elise was desperate enough to frame an innocent man, she was desperate enough to do something worse. Destroy evidence. Intimidate witnesses. Maybe even hurt someone else. Cole couldn't wait anymore. He picked up his phone and called the district attorney. "I need a warrant," he said, "for a laptop belonging to Elise Marbury." A pause on the other end. "You sure about this, Marcus? Gregory Marbury is going to make your life hell." "I know," Cole said. "But this girl killed someone. And I'm going to prove it." The warrant was signed the next morning. And by noon, Detective Marcus Cole was standing on the Marbury doorstep, flanked by 2 uniformed officers, a folded piece of paper in his hand. When Elise opened the door, her face went pale for just a fraction of a second. Then the mask slid back into place. "Detective Cole," she said smoothly. "What a surprise." "Miss Marbury," Cole replied, his voice flat. "We have a warrant to search your residence and seize any electronic devices. I suggest you step aside." For a moment, Elise didn't move. Her eyes flickered, calculating, measuring, searching for an escape. But there was none. She stepped aside, and the walls that had protected her for so long began to crumble. The search took 4 hours. 4 hours of strangers going through Elise's things. Her bedroom, her closet, her desk drawers. Every private corner of her carefully constructed world, violated by gloved hands and evidence bags. Elise sat on the living room couch the entire time, her posture perfect, her face blank. Gregory stood nearby, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He had arrived within minutes of the search beginning, already on the phone with his legal team, already preparing for war. "This is harassment," he said coldly to Detective Cole. "My daughter is a minor. She's been through a traumatic experience. And you're treating her like a criminal based on the paranoid delusions of a grieving mother." Cole didn't flinch. "We're following the evidence, Mr. Marbury. That's our job." "What evidence?" "There is no evidence. Because there's nothing to find." Cole said nothing. But he didn't need to. Because upstairs, in Elise's bedroom, a forensic technician had just opened her laptop. The laptop was a MacBook Pro. Silver. Sleek. The same model half the kids at Willowbrook High carried in their backpacks. On the surface, it looked ordinary. But Detective Cole had learned a long time ago that surfaces meant nothing. The technician, a young woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in digital forensics, connected the laptop to a portable drive and began the extraction process. "Anything interesting?" Cole asked, standing in the doorway. "Give me a few minutes," Sarah said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "I'm pulling browser history, documents, and any recently deleted files." Cole nodded and stepped back into the hallway. He could hear Gregory downstairs, still arguing, still threatening. The man was good. Cole had to give him that. Aggressive. Intimidating. The kind of lawyer who made witnesses crumble and juries second-guess themselves. But Cole wasn't a witness. And he wasn't going to crumble. 20 minutes later, Sarah called him back. "Detective? You're going to want to see this." Cole walked over and looked at the screen. Sarah had pulled up a folder labeled School Projects. Inside were dozens of subfolders: history, English, chemistry, biology. Normal stuff for a high school student. But there was one folder that didn't fit. It was labeled Journal. Sarah clicked on it. Inside were over 50 documents, each one dated, going back almost 2 years. She kept a diary, Sarah said. Digital. Hidden inside her school files. Cole leaned closer. Open the most recent entries. September. Sarah scrolled down and clicked. The document opened. And Detective Marcus Cole felt his blood run cold. September 1st. The scholarship results come out next week. I already know what's going to happen. Cora is going to win. She's going to take what should be mine, and everyone is going to celebrate her like she's some kind of hero. They don't see what I see. They don't understand that she's weak. That she's only where she is because people feel sorry for her. Her mother had cancer. Boo-hoo. That doesn't make her special. It makes her a charity case. I've worked harder than anyone. I've sacrificed more than anyone. And it's all going to be stolen by a girl who can't even look over the edge of a cliff without crying. Something needs to be done. I just haven't decided what yet. Cole's hands were shaking. Keep going, he said quietly. Sarah scrolled to the next entry. September 4th. I've been thinking about the quarry. It's isolated. Deep. No cameras. Bad cell reception. The rocks are slippery when it rains. If someone were to fall, it would look like an accident. A tragedy. Something terrible that no one could have prevented. The weather forecast says rain on Friday. I think I know what I need to do. Cole closed his eyes for a moment. He had suspected. He had gathered evidence. He had built a circumstantial case that pointed toward murder. But this was different. This was a confession, written in Elise's own words, dated before the crime, detailing her motive, her plan, her cold-blooded calculation. She had written it all down, like she was documenting a school project. Like killing her best friend was just another task to complete. September 6th. Tomorrow is the day. I texted Cora and told her I wanted to make things right. She believed me immediately. Of course she did. She's always trusted me. That's her weakness. She sees the best in everyone, even when there's nothing good to see. I've rehearsed everything. The conversation. The photo by the edge. The push. The 911 call afterward. By this time tomorrow, Cora will be dead, and I will be the grieving best friend. And no one will ever know the truth. Sarah stopped scrolling. There's more, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Entries from after. Describing the funeral. The eulogy. How she felt. Nothing. Cole nodded slowly. Print everything. Every single entry. And make sure the chain of custody is airtight. I don't want any room for a defense attorney to claim this was tampered with. Yes, sir. Cole stepped back from the laptop. His heart was pounding. His mouth was dry. In 23 years of police work, he had seen a lot of evil. Drug dealers who shot kids over territory. Husbands who beat their wives to death. Desperate people who did desperate things. But he had never seen anything like this. A 17-year-old girl who planned a murder with the precision of a surgeon. Who killed her best friend and then gave a eulogy at her funeral. Who documented the entire thing like she was proud of it. This wasn't just evil. This was something else entirely. Downstairs, Cole found Elise exactly where he had left her. Sitting on the couch. Hands folded in her lap. Face calm. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment, just a moment, their eyes met. Cole had interrogated hundreds of suspects over the years. He had seen guilt, denial, fear, rage. He had learned to read people like books. But Elise's eyes gave him nothing. No fear. No anger. No regret. Just cold, empty curiosity, like she was studying him, wondering what he had found, calculating her next move. Gregory stepped forward, positioning himself between Cole and his daughter. Are you finished? Because if so, I'd like you to leave my home immediately. Cole held up the laptop, now sealed in an evidence bag. We're taking this for analysis. On what grounds? On the grounds that your daughter is a suspect in a murder investigation, Mr. Marbury. And we have reason to believe this device contains evidence relevant to that investigation. Gregory's face went pale. Murder? That's insane. Cora's death was ruled an accident. Cases can be reopened when new evidence emerges. What new evidence? Cole looked past Gregory, directly at Elise. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. But something had shifted in her expression. A flicker of something that might have been concern, quickly buried beneath layers of practiced composure. I think your daughter knows exactly what evidence we're talking about, Cole said quietly. And I think you should start preparing for what comes next. He turned and walked toward the door. We'll be in touch. The door closed behind him. For a long moment, the Marbury house was silent. Then Gregory turned to his daughter. Elise. What is he talking about? Elise didn't answer. She was staring at the floor, her mind racing. The journal. The journal. How could she have been so stupid? She had written everything down. Every thought. Every plan. Every cold, calculated detail. She had done it because it made her feel powerful, because documenting her brilliance had been part of the thrill. And now that brilliance was going to destroy her. Elise. Gregory's voice was sharper now. Demanding. Answer me. What is on that laptop? She looked up at her father. For the first time in her life, she didn't have a lie ready. I need a lawyer, she said quietly. A real one. Not you. Gregory stared at her. And in that moment, something shifted between them. He had always known his daughter was different. Cold. Calculating. More like him than he wanted to admit. But this was something he hadn't allowed himself to consider. What did you do? He whispered. Elise held his gaze. What I had to. 3 days later, the digital forensics team completed their analysis. They found everything. The journal entries. The browser history. The searches about drowning, body decomposition, and how to make a murder look like an accident. They also found something else, something Elise hadn't even remembered. A voice memo. Recorded on her phone the night of the murder. Apparently, when Elise had called 911, she had accidentally triggered a voice memo that captured the entire call, including the 30 seconds before she dialed. 30 seconds of silence. Then a deep breath. Then Elise's voice, calm and rehearsed. Okay. Crying. Panic. Breathless. You can do this. And then the 911 call, hysterical, desperate, convincing. Except now, with the rehearsal captured on audio, it was clear that every sob, every gasp, every trembling word had been performed. The mask had finally slipped. Detective Cole sat at his desk, the case file spread out in front of him. Browser history. Journal entries. Witness testimony. Audio evidence. It wasn't just circumstantial anymore. It was overwhelming. He picked up his phone and called the district attorney. We've got enough, he said. I want an arrest warrant for Elise Marbury. First-degree murder. A pause on the other end. You're sure about this, Marcus? She's 17. And her father. I don't care who her father is, Cole interrupted. She planned this murder for weeks. She executed it without remorse. She tried to frame an innocent man. And she wrote about it like she was journaling about a vacation. He looked at the photo of Cora Whitfield pinned to his board. Smiling. Hopeful. Alive. This girl deserves justice, he said quietly. And I'm going to make sure she gets it. The warrant was signed that afternoon. And the next morning, Elise Marbury's world came crashing down. It happened on a Wednesday. October 2nd, 2019. 3 weeks after the search. 1 month after Cora's funeral. And exactly 25 days after Elise Marbury had stood at a podium and delivered a eulogy for the girl she murdered. The morning started like any other. Elise woke up at 6:30 a.m. Showered. Did her hair. Applied minimal makeup, just enough to look polished but not like she was trying too hard. She put on her favorite outfit, a cream-colored cashmere sweater, dark jeans, brown leather boots. She looked at herself in the mirror. Perfect. As always. If she was worried about the investigation, she didn't show it. The past few weeks had been tense, sure. Her father had hired a team of lawyers. Her mother had started drinking more than usual. The whispers at school had grown louder, more pointed. But Elise remained calm. Because Elise always remained calm. They have nothing, she told herself as she grabbed her backpack. Browser history and journal entries aren't proof. Any good lawyer can argue those away. They can't prove I pushed her. They can't prove anything. She walked downstairs, grabbed an apple from the kitchen counter, and headed for the front door. Elise. She turned. Gregory was standing in the hallway, still in his robe, a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked older than she remembered. Tired. The bags under his eyes had deepened. His hair seemed grayer. Yeah. He opened his mouth to say something, then stopped. Have a good day at school. Elise studied him for a moment. Was that concern in his eyes? Guilt? Fear? She couldn't tell. And honestly, she didn't care. Thanks, Dad. She walked out the door. The drive to school took 12 minutes. Elise listened to a true crime podcast on the way. Something about a woman who had poisoned her husband and almost gotten away with it. The host was discussing how the killer had made a single, tiny mistake that led to her downfall. Elise smirked. Amateur, she thought. That would never happen to me. She pulled into the student parking lot at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before first period. The lot was already half full, clusters of students milling around, chatting, laughing. Normal morning. Normal people. Normal life. Elise parked in her usual spot, grabbed her bag, and stepped out of the car. That's when she saw them. 2 police cruisers were parked near the main entrance. Not hidden. Not subtle. Right there in the open, where everyone could see. Elise's heart skipped, just for a second, but she forced herself to keep walking. Stay calm. It's probably nothing. A drug search. A safety drill. Some idiot got caught with weed again. But as she got closer, she noticed people staring. Not at the police cars. At her. Madison Chen was standing near the flagpole, phone in hand, eyes wide. Jake Morrison, captain of the lacrosse team, was whispering something to his friends, all of them glancing in Elise's direction. Even the teachers looked different, standing in clusters, speaking in hushed tones, watching her approach. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. She was 10 feet from the front entrance when the doors opened. Detective Marcus Cole stepped out. He was wearing a dark suit, no tie. His badge was clipped to his belt. His face was unreadable, the same hard, flat expression he had worn when he searched her house. Behind him were 2 uniformed officers. Elise stopped walking. The courtyard went silent. 200 students. 50 teachers. All of them frozen in place, watching, waiting. Cole walked toward her slowly, deliberately, his footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. He stopped about 3 feet away. Elise Marbury? She didn't respond. Elise Marbury, you are under arrest for the murder of Cora Whitfield. The words hit her like a physical blow. Not because she was surprised. Not because she was scared. But because they were doing this here. In front of everyone. In front of the school, her classmates, the people she had spent years manipulating and impressing and controlling. They were humiliating her. And there was nothing she could do about it. Cole continued, his voice calm and professional. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. He paused. Do you understand these rights as I have explained them to you? Elise stared at him. Her mind was racing, calculating, searching for an escape. But there was none. Not here. Not now. Not with hundreds of eyes watching her every move. Yes, she said finally. I understand. Cole nodded to the officers behind him. Turn around, please. Hands behind your back. For a moment, Elise didn't move. She could feel the weight of every stare, every whisper, every phone camera pointed in her direction, recording this moment for posterity. The golden girl. The perfect student. The best friend everyone wished they had. Being led away in handcuffs. Slowly, mechanically, she turned around and placed her hands behind her back. The cold metal of the cuffs clicked around her wrists. As they led her toward the cruiser, Elise kept her head high. She refused to look down. Refused to cry. Refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside, something was shifting. Not regret. Not guilt. Those feelings were still foreign to her, emotions she understood intellectually but had never actually experienced. No, what she felt was something else entirely. Rage. Cold, burning rage. At Detective Cole for ruining everything. At Linda Whitfield for refusing to accept her daughter's death. At the universe for daring to treat her like a common criminal. This isn't over, she thought as they opened the cruiser door. This is just the beginning. She ducked into the back seat, her wrists aching from the handcuffs, her cashmere sweater already wrinkling. The door slammed shut. Through the window, she could see her classmates. Dozens of them, phones raised, mouths open, staring at her like she was some kind of zoo animal. Madison Chen was crying. Jake Morrison looked like he might be sick. And somewhere in the crowd, Elise spotted a familiar face. A girl named Beth, who had been Cora's lab partner, who had been at the funeral, sobbing in the front row, who had hugged Elise afterward and thanked her for such a beautiful eulogy. Beth wasn't crying now. She was smiling. The ride to the police station took 20 minutes. Elise sat in the back of the cruiser, staring straight ahead, her face expressionless. The two officers in front didn't speak to her, didn't even look at her. They just drove, following Cole's vehicle through the quiet streets of Willowbrook. Past the coffee shop where Elise and Cora used to study. Past the park where they had their first real conversation, back in second grade. Past the hospice where Elise had volunteered, not because she cared about dying people, but because it looked good on college applications. Everything she had built, everything she had worked for, gone. Destroyed by a laptop and a grieving mother and a detective who couldn't mind his own business. At the station, Elise was processed like any other suspect. Fingerprints, mugshot, personal belongings confiscated and catalogued. The mugshot was the worst part. They made her stand against a white wall, holding a placard with her name and booking number. The flash was bright, harsh, unflattering. Elise knew that photo would be everywhere by tomorrow. Every news outlet, every social media feed, every corner of the internet. The Golden Girl, transformed into a monster. She almost laughed at the irony. I've always been a monster, she thought. You're just finally seeing it. They put her in an interrogation room. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, one on each side. Elise sat in silence, her hands folded in front of her, waiting. She knew how this worked. She had watched enough crime shows, read enough legal thrillers, listened to enough of her father's case discussions to understand the game. They would try to get her to talk, to confess, to incriminate herself further. But Elise wasn't going to play their game. She was going to wait for her lawyer. And then she was going to fight. The door opened. Detective Cole walked in, carrying a manila folder thick with documents. He sat down across from her, placed the folder on the table, and studied her for a long moment. "Your attorney is on the way," he said. "But I wanted to talk to you first. Off the record." Elise said nothing. "You don't have to say anything," Cole continued. "I just want you to understand something." He opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. Cora Whitfield. Smiling. Alive. Happy. "This girl trusted you," Cole said, his voice quiet but hard. "She loved you like a sister. And you killed her because of a scholarship." Elise looked at the photo, looked at Cora's bright eyes and warm smile, and felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. "Are you done?" she asked coolly. Cole stared at her. "You know what the saddest part is," he said. "You're not even sorry. You're sitting here, facing a murder charge, and you don't feel an ounce of remorse." Elise tilted her head slightly. "Is that a question, detective?" "Because I was told not to answer questions without my lawyer present." Cole held her gaze for a long moment. Then he stood up, gathered his folder, and walked toward the door. "Your lawyer will be here in 30 minutes, he said. "Enjoy the quiet while you can. Because after today, your life is never going to—" He opened the door, paused, looked back at her one last time. "Cora deserved better than you." And then he was gone. Elise sat alone in the interrogation room. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The air conditioning hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a phone was ringing. She stared at the gray wall in front of her. This isn't how it was supposed to go. She had planned everything so carefully. Every detail, every contingency, every possible variable. And yet, here she was. Arrested. exposed, facing a murder charge that could send her to prison for the rest of her life. Or worse. Connecticut had the death penalty. For the first time since the night at the quarry, Elise felt something flicker inside her. Not guilt. Not regret. Fear. She pushed it down immediately, buried it beneath layers of ice and indifference, locked it away where no one, not even herself, could see it. It doesn't matter, she told herself. You're smarter than them. You'll find a way out of this. You always do. But somewhere deep inside, in that cold, empty space where her conscience should have been, a tiny voice whispered, "What if you don't?" The trial of Elise Marbury began on a cold Monday morning in January. 4 months had passed since her arrest. 4 months of legal motions, media frenzy, and endless speculation. 4 months of Elise sitting in a juvenile detention facility, waiting for her day in court. She had been charged as an adult. The prosecution argued, and the judge agreed, that the premeditated nature of the crime, the calculated cover-up, and the complete lack of remorse demonstrated a level of criminal sophistication that went far beyond typical juvenile behavior. Elise Marbury would be tried as an adult, and if convicted, she would face adult consequences, including the death penalty. The Willowbrook County Courthouse was a 100-year-old building with marble floors, high ceilings, and wooden benches worn smooth by decades of anxious waiting. On that first morning, every seat was taken. Reporters from national news networks filled the front rows, their notebooks open, their cameras waiting outside. Behind them sat townspeople, teachers, neighbors, classmates, all desperate to witness the trial of the century. Linda Whitfield sat in the second row, directly behind the prosecution table. She wore a simple black dress and clutched a photograph of Cora to her chest. Her husband, Richard, sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his face drawn with exhaustion. On the other side of the aisle sat Gregory Marbury. Alone. Elise's mother had stopped coming to court appearances weeks ago. The stress, the shame, the whiskey, it had all become too much. She had checked herself into a rehabilitation facility 2 states away. Gregory hadn't visited her once. He was too busy trying to save his daughter. At exactly 9 a.m., the side door opened. Elise walked in, flanked by 2 bailiffs. She was dressed conservatively, a navy blue cardigan, white blouse, gray skirt. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No jewelry. Minimal makeup. The defense team had worked hard on her image. Gone was the polished golden girl. In her place was someone softer, younger, more vulnerable. Someone a jury might feel sorry for. Elise kept her eyes forward as she walked to the defense table. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the whispers, didn't react when someone in the back muttered, "Murderer," loud enough for everyone to hear. She simply sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. The mask was firmly in place. All rise. The courtroom stood as Judge Harold Crane entered. 72 years old. Silver hair. A reputation for fairness but also for severity. He had been on the bench for over 4 decades and had seen every kind of case imaginable. But even he seemed affected by this one. His face was grim as he settled into his chair and surveyed the packed courtroom. "Be seated." Everyone sat. Judge Crane shuffled some papers, then looked up. "This is the case of the state of Connecticut versus Elise Marbury. The defendant is charged with murder in the 1st degree." He paused. "Are both sides ready to proceed?" The prosecutor stood. "The state is ready, Your Honor." Diana Vance was 47 years old. Former child psychologist turned attorney. She had a reputation for understanding the minds of young offenders, and for showing no mercy to those who exploited their youth to escape justice. She had requested this case personally. "The defense is ready, Your Honor." Charles Whitmore was Gregory's hand-picked choice. 60 years old. Silver-tongued. A legend in criminal defense circles. He had gotten acquittals in cases that seemed unwinnable. If anyone could save Elise, it was him. Judge Crane nodded. "Ms. Vance, you may begin your opening statement." Diana Vance stood slowly. She walked to the center of the courtroom, her heels clicking on the marble floor, and stopped directly in front of the jury box. 12 people. 7 women, 5 men. Ages ranging from 24 to 68. Teachers, accountants, retirees, a nurse. 12 strangers who would decide whether Elise Marbury lived or died. Diana looked at each of them in turn. Then she began. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about masks. She paused, letting the word hang in the air. We all wear masks, to some extent. We present different versions of ourselves to different people. The face we show our boss isn't the same face we show our friends. The person we are at a party isn't the same person we are at a funeral. She turned slightly, gesturing toward Elise. But the defendant took this concept to an extreme that most of us cannot even imagine. 4 years, her entire life, really, she has worn a mask of perfection. The perfect daughter. The perfect student. The perfect friend. Diana walked closer to the jury box. But behind that mask was something else entirely. Something cold. Something calculating. Something that viewed the people around her not as human beings, but as tools to be used and discarded. She picked up a photograph from the prosecution table. Cora Whitfield. Smiling. Alive. Cora Whitfield was one of those tools. She was the defendant's best friend for 15 years. She trusted her completely. Loved her like a sister. Diana held up the photo for the jury to see. And on the night of September 7, 2018, the defendant lured Cora to an isolated quarry, pushed her off a 40-foot cliff, and watched her drown. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. This was not a crime of passion, Diana continued. It was not a moment of madness. It was a cold, calculated, premeditated murder, planned for weeks, executed with precision, and covered up with a performance so convincing that it fooled everyone. She set down the photo. Over the course of this trial, you will hear testimony from witnesses who saw and heard things that contradict the defendant's story. You will see digital evidence, browser searches, journal entries, that prove the defendant researched and planned this murder in advance. You will hear audio evidence of the defendant rehearsing her 911 call before she made it. Diana's voice hardened. And you will come to understand that behind that innocent face, that soft voice, that carefully crafted image of a grieving best friend, is a killer. She looked directly at Elise. Elise looked back, her expression unchanged. The evidence in this case is overwhelming, Diana concluded. And at the end of this trial, I am confident that you will reach the only verdict that justice allows. She turned back to the jury. Guilty. Of murder in the first degree. She returned to her seat. The courtroom was silent. Judge Crane turned to the defense table. Mr. Whitmore, your opening statement. Charles Whitmore rose slowly. He was tall, elegant, with a voice like aged whiskey, smooth and persuasive. He had defended celebrities, politicians, and corporate executives. He knew how to work a room. But today, he faced a challenge unlike any other. The evidence against Elise was devastating, and everyone knew it. He walked to the center of the courtroom, his hands clasped behind his back. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, the prosecution would have you believe that this case is simple, that the evidence speaks for itself, that my client is a monster hiding behind a mask. He shook his head slowly. But nothing about this case is simple. And the evidence? Well, the evidence is far more complicated than Ms. Vance would like you to believe. He began to pace. Yes, my client made internet searches about drowning and quarries. She's a curious, intelligent young woman who was processing a traumatic event. Is curiosity a crime? Is seeking information evidence of murder? He turned to face the jury. Yes, my client kept a journal. A private journal, never meant for anyone else's eyes. And in that journal, she expressed frustration, jealousy, even dark thoughts about her friend. He paused. But who among us hasn't had dark thoughts? Who among us hasn't written things in private that we would be ashamed to see made public? Thoughts are not crimes. Words are not murder. He gestured toward the prosecution table. The state will present witness testimony from a homeless man who claims he heard voices and laughter at the quarry that night. But this witness was over 100 yards away, in the dark, in the rain. Is that reliable? Is that proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Whitmore walked closer to the jury box. The truth is, there is no physical evidence connecting my client to any crime. No fingerprints on Cora's body. No DNA evidence of a struggle. No witnesses who actually saw what happened at the edge of that cliff. He let that sink in. What we have is a tragic accident. Two friends at a dangerous location, in poor weather conditions. One of them slipped and fell. The other tried to save her and failed. He turned to look at Elise. My client is not a monster. She is a traumatized young woman who has been vilified by the media, persecuted by a grieving family, and prosecuted based on speculation and circumstance. He faced the jury one final time. At the end of this trial, I will ask you to look past the sensational headlines. Look past the emotional manipulation. Look at the actual evidence, or rather, the lack of it. He spread his hands. And when you do, I am confident you will find that the prosecution has not met its burden, that reasonable doubt exists at every turn, and that the only just verdict is not guilty. He returned to his seat. Judge Crane made some notes, then looked up. Ms. Vance, you may call your first witness. Diana stood. The state calls Earl Briggs. A murmur went through the courtroom as the side door opened. Earl walked in slowly. He had cleaned up for court. His beard was trimmed. He wore a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit. His hands were shaking slightly as he made his way to the witness stand. But his eyes were clear, and his voice, when he raised his right hand to take the oath, was steady. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He sat down. Diana approached the stand. Mr. Briggs, can you tell the court where you were on the night of September 7th, 2018? Earl nodded. I was in the woods near Ashford Quarry. That's where I live. Have for about 6 years now. And what did you hear that night? Earl took a breath. I heard two voices. Two girls. They were talking at first, normal, friendly. Then something changed. One of them sounded scared. Real scared. She was begging. Pleading. What happened next? Earl's face darkened. A scream. Short. Cut off fast. Then a splash. And after the splash? Earl looked directly at Elise. Silence. For a few seconds. And then, laughter. Quiet, but I heard it. One of them laughed. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Crane banged his gavel. Order. Diana waited for quiet, then continued. Mr. Briggs, are you certain about what you heard? Yes, ma'am. I've heard a lot of sounds in my life. Good and bad. That laugh, it wasn't the sound of someone watching their friend fall by accident. He paused. It was the sound of someone who got exactly what they wanted. Elise sat motionless at the defense table. Her face was calm, composed, unreadable. But beneath the mask, something was stirring. The trial had only just begun. And already, the walls were closing in. The trial continued for 6 days. 6 days of testimony. 6 days of evidence. 6 days of the prosecution building its case piece by piece, brick by brick, until the wall around Elise Marbury seemed impossible to escape. Detective Marcus Cole took the stand and walked the jury through the investigation. The browser history. The deleted files. The recovered journal entries. He spoke calmly, professionally, letting the evidence speak for itself. Sarah Chen, the digital forensics expert, explained how they had recovered data from Elise's laptop. She displayed the journal entries on a large screen for the entire courtroom to see. Something needs to be done. I think I know what I need to do. By this time tomorrow, Cora will be dead. The words hung in the air like poison. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One woman in the back row covered her mouth with her hand. And through it all, Elise sat motionless, expressionless, a statue carved from ice. But the most devastating moment came on day 5. The audio evidence. Diana Vance stood before the jury, a small digital recorder in her hand. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear is a voice memo that was accidentally recorded on the defendant's phone on the night of September 7, 2018. It captures the 30 seconds before she placed her 911 call. She pressed play. The courtroom went silent. At first, there was nothing. Just ambient noise. Wind. Rain. The distant sound of water. Then a deep breath. And then Elise's voice. Calm, measured, completely controlled. Okay. Crying. Panic. Breathless. You can do this. Another breath. And then the transformation. The same voice, but different now. Hysterical. Desperate. Trembling. Oh my God, please help. My friend, she fell. She fell into the water and I can't find her. Please, you have to send someone. Oh God, please. Diana stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda Whitfield was sobbing quietly in the gallery. Richard had his arm around her, his own face wet with tears. Several jurors were staring at Elise with expressions of pure horror. One man in the front row looked like he might be sick. And Elise? Elise stared straight ahead, her face completely blank. No shame. No embarrassment. No remorse. Just nothing. 3 weeks passed between the verdict and the formal sentencing hearing. 3 weeks of legal motions. Appeals. Last-ditch efforts by Charles Whitmore to save his client's life. He argued mental incompetence. He argued that the confession was made under duress. He argued that the death penalty was cruel and unusual punishment for someone so young. Every motion was denied. Every appeal was rejected. The wheels of justice, once they started turning, could not be stopped. And so, on October 14, 2019, exactly 13 months after Cora Whitfield took her last breath, Elise Marbury stood before Judge Harold Crane for the final time. The courtroom was different this time. Quieter. More somber. The frenzied energy of the trial had been replaced by something heavier. Something final. The gallery was packed, but nobody was whispering. Nobody was checking their phones. Everyone sat in silence, waiting for the last chapter of this terrible story to unfold. Linda Whitfield sat in her usual spot, directly behind the prosecution table. She looked older than she had a year ago. The grief had carved lines into her face, turned her hair gray at the temples, left shadows under her eyes that never seemed to fade. But she was here. She had promised Cora she would see this through. And Linda Whitfield always kept her promises. Elise was brought in through the side door. She looked different now. The carefully curated image was gone. No more soft cardigans or gentle waves in her hair. Her face was pale, thin. The months in detention had stripped away the polish, leaving something raw underneath. But her eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. Watchful. Even now, even facing death, Elise Marbury was still analyzing. Still measuring. Still looking for angles. She sat down at the defense table, her wrists shackled, her movements slow and deliberate. Gregory was in the gallery this time, not at the defense table. He hadn't spoken to his daughter in weeks. The shame, the scandal, the destruction of everything he had built, it had finally broken something between them. He sat alone in the back row, his face gray, his eyes fixed on the floor. He couldn't even look at her. Judge Crane entered, and everyone rose. He looked tired, worn, like this case had taken something out of him that he would never get back. He settled into his chair and studied the courtroom for a long moment. Then he spoke. "We are here today for the formal sentencing of Elise Marbury, who has been found guilty of murder in the first degree. Before I pronounce the final sentence, I am required by law to offer the defendant an opportunity to make a statement." He turned to Elise. "Miss Marbury, do you wish to address the court?" For a long moment, Elise didn't move. The courtroom held its breath. Whitmore leaned over and whispered something in her ear, probably urging her to stay silent, to avoid making things worse, to just let this be over. But Elise had never been good at staying silent. She had never been good at letting other people have the last word. Slowly, she rose to her feet. "Yes, Your Honor. I would like to make a statement." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Crane nodded, his expression wary. "You may proceed." Elise turned to face the courtroom. Her eyes swept across the gallery, the reporters, the spectators, the familiar faces she had once charmed and manipulated. They came to rest, briefly, on her father, who still wouldn't meet her gaze. Then they moved to Linda Whitfield. Mother to mother, their eyes locked. Linda's face was wet with tears, but she didn't look away. She refused to give Elise the satisfaction of seeing her break. Elise smiled. Not the warm smile she had worn for years. Not the calculating smile she had shown during the trial. This was something else entirely. This was the smile of someone who had already lost everything and no longer cared about consequences. "I've spent a lot of time thinking these past few weeks," Elise began, her voice calm and clear. "Sitting in my cell, staring at the walls, waiting for this moment." She paused. "Everyone keeps asking me if I'm sorry, if I regret what I did, if I feel remorse." She tilted her head slightly. "The honest answer is no." A gasp rippled through the crowd. "But that's not what I want to talk about today. Today, I want to tell you what really happened, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, because I don't think any of you truly understand." Diana Vance shifted in her seat, her expression tense. This was dangerous, unpredictable. Elise was a live grenade, and she had just pulled the pin. But there was nothing anyone could do. The defendant had a right to speak, and Elise Marbury was going to use every second of it. "Cora Whitfield," Elise continued, "was my best friend for 15 years. We grew up together, shared everything, told each other our deepest secrets." Her voice was almost wistful. "But here's the thing about Cora, she never had to work for anything. People just loved her. Effortlessly. Automatically. She walked into a room, and everyone wanted to be her friend." Elise's expression hardened. "I had to fight for everything. Every grade. Every award. Every ounce of recognition. Nothing was ever given to me. I had to earn it. I had to be perfect, all the time, just to be noticed." She looked at the jury, the same 12 people who had convicted her, who were now watching her with expressions of horrified fascination. "The scholarship was supposed to be mine. I had worked my entire life for it. And then Cora, sweet, effortless Cora, swooped in and took it. Not because she was better than me, but because her mother had cancer, and everyone felt sorry for her." Elise's voice dripped with contempt. "She won because of pity. Not merit. Pity." Linda Whitfield's hands were shaking. Richard put his arm around her, pulling her close, murmuring something in her ear. But Linda couldn't hear him. All she could hear was this monster talking about her daughter like she was a problem to be solved. Elise continued. "So yes, I planned it. I thought about it for weeks. I considered every angle, every variable, every possible outcome. And when the time came, I executed my plan perfectly." She smiled faintly. "Well, almost perfectly. Obviously, I made some mistakes. The journal was stupid. The browser history was careless. I got sloppy because I was arrogant. I thought I was untouchable." She shrugged. "I was wrong." The casual admission sent a chill through the courtroom. "But here's what I really want you to understand." Elise leaned forward slightly, her eyes intense. "The night at the quarry, when I pushed Cora, when I watched her fall." She paused for a long moment. She begged. Linda let out a strangled sob. She said my name, over and over. "Elise, please. Elise, help me. Elise, why are you doing this?" Elise's voice was calm, measured. like she was reading from a grocery list. She was reaching for me, even as she fell. Her hand was stretched out, like she thought I might still save her. The courtroom was dead silent, and I just stood there, watching, listening to her hit the water, listening to the silence afterward. Elisa's smile widened. And you know what I felt? She let the question hang in the air. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just relief. Like a weight had been lifted. Like I had finally solved a problem that had been bothering me for months. Judge Crane's face had gone pale. In over 4 decades on the bench, he had never witnessed anything like this. A defendant, a teenager, standing before the court and describing a murder with the emotional engagement of someone discussing the weather. It was beyond cold. It was inhuman. Elise wasn't finished. Everyone in this room is looking at me like I'm a monster, she said. And maybe I am. Maybe there's something broken inside me that can't be fixed. She looked directly at Linda Whitfield. But I want you to know something, Mrs. Whitfield. Something I've never told anyone. Linda's face was a mask of grief and rage. Cora's last word wasn't, help. It wasn't, please. It wasn't even, why. Elise paused, letting the moment stretch. Her last word was, Elise. She died with my name on her lips. Linda broke. The sob that erupted from her was barely human, a sound of pure, primal anguish that echoed off the marble walls and seemed to shake the very foundation of the courtroom. Richard held her as she collapsed against him, her body racked with grief. And Elise just watched. Come. Cold. Satisfied. I have one more thing to say. Elise turned back to face the judge. You're going to kill me. I understand that. I've accepted it. She lifted her chin defiantly. But I want everyone in this room to know something. Something they can carry with them for the rest of their lives. She looked around the courtroom, at the reporters, the spectators, the jurors, her father, the prosecution team. The only thing I regret, she paused, is that I can't do it again. The courtroom exploded. People screaming. People crying. Someone in the back row fainted. A reporter dropped his notebook and just stared, mouth hanging open. A juror in the front row, the middle-aged woman who had dabbed at her eyes during Elisa's testimony, slumped forward in her seat and had to be attended to by a bailiff. Judge Crane banged his gavel over and over, but it was useless. The chaos was complete. And in the middle of it all, Elise Marbury stood perfectly still. Her eyes found Diana Vance, the prosecutor who had torn apart her lies, who had exposed her to the world, who had demanded the ultimate punishment. And Elise smiled at her. A real smile. A satisfied smile. The smile of someone who had just won a game that no one else knew they were playing. Because this was what Elise had wanted all along. Not freedom. Not acquittal. Not a second chance at life. She wanted to be remembered. She wanted to make sure that no one, not the judge, not the jury, not Linda Whitfield, not a single person in that courtroom, would ever forget her name. And with those final chilling words, she had guaranteed exactly that. It took 15 minutes to restore order. When the courtroom finally fell silent, Judge Crane spoke in a voice that trembled with barely contained emotion. In my 43 years on this bench, I have encountered many forms of evil. But I have never witnessed anything as disturbing as what I have just heard. He looked at Elise, and for a moment, something like sorrow flickered in his eyes. Miss Marbury, you are a deeply troubled young woman. Perhaps you were born this way. Perhaps you were made this way by circumstances beyond your control. I don't know, and frankly, at this point, it doesn't matter. His voice hardened. What matters is that you took the life of an innocent young woman. A young woman who trusted you, who loved you, who died with your name on her lips, believing until the very end that her best friend might save her. He shook his head slowly. And you feel nothing. No remorse. No guilt. No humanity whatsoever. He straightened in his chair. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to death by lethal injection. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none left to give." The gavel fell, and Elise Marbury's fate was sealed. As the bailiff stepped forward to escort her out, Elise turned one last time. Her eyes swept across the courtroom, the chaos, the tears, the horror. And she smiled. Because even in defeat, even facing death, Elise Marbury had won. She would be remembered. Forever. 1 year later. October 14th, 2020. The leaves had just started to turn in Willowbrook, splashes of red and gold against the gray Connecticut sky. The air was cool, crisp, carrying the faint smell of wood smoke from someone's fireplace. It was the kind of autumn day that Cora Whitfield had always loved. Linda Whitfield walked through the cemetery gates at exactly 10 a.m. She carried a single white rose in her hand, Cora's favorite flower. She had brought one every week for the past year, placing it carefully at the base of the marble headstone that marked her daughter's final resting place. The walk to Cora's grave was familiar now. Linda could have done it with her eyes closed. Past the old oak tree. Past the stone angel that watched over the children's section. Past the bench where she sometimes sat when the grief became too heavy to carry. She stopped in front of the headstone. Cora Elizabeth Whitfield. March 15, 2001 to September 7, 2018. Beloved daughter, cherished friend. She made the world brighter just by being in it. Linda knelt down and placed the rose with the others, a small collection of wilted petals that she would clear away next week, making room for new ones. "Hey, baby," she whispered. "It's Mom." She sat back on her heels, her eyes fixed on the engraved name. "I know I say this every time, but I miss you. Every single day. The house is so quiet without you. Your dad tries to fill the silence, but—" She smiled sadly. "You know how he is. Not much of a talker." She reached out and touched the cold marble. "The trial's been over for a year now. The appeals are done. She's still on death row, waiting. Could be years before they actually do it. That's how the system works, apparently." Linda's voice hardened slightly. "Part of me wants it to happen tomorrow. Part of me wants her to suffer as long as possible. And part of me—" She trailed off. "Part of me just wants to stop thinking about her altogether. To let her fade away. To focus on you instead of the monster who took you from me." She was quiet for a moment. "Your scholarship fund is doing well. Did I tell you that? We've given out 3 awards so far. 3 kids who couldn't afford college, getting a chance because of you. Because of what you stood for." A tear rolled down her cheek. "That's your legacy, Cora. Not her. Not the trial. Not the headlines. The girl who made everyone feel special. The girl who turned her pain into purpose. The girl who believed the best in everyone, even when—" Her voice broke. "Even when they didn't deserve it." She wiped her eyes and stood up slowly, her knees aching from the cold ground. "I love you, sweetheart. I'll see you next week." She kissed her fingertips and pressed them to the headstone. Then she turned and walked away. 300 miles away, in a maximum security women's correctional facility, Elise Marbury sat in her cell. The room was small. 8 feet by 10 feet. A metal bed bolted to the wall. A toilet with no lid. A tiny window, barely bigger than a shoebox, that let in a sliver of gray daylight. This had been her world for 12 months. And unless something changed, it would be her world until the day she died. Elise sat at a small metal desk, writing. She had discovered, over the past year, that she enjoyed writing. Letters, mostly. To journalists. To true crime podcasters. To anyone who wanted to hear her side of the story. And there were plenty who wanted to hear it. Her case had become a media sensation. Books had been written about her. Documentaries were in production. Psychology students analyzed her behavior in classrooms across the country. Elise Marbury had become famous. Infamous. Exactly as she had wanted. She finished the letter she was working on, a response to a journalist from a major news magazine who wanted an exclusive interview, and set down her pen. She looked at the wall of her cell. It was covered with clippings. Articles about her case. Photos from the trial. Headlines that featured her name in bold letters. The teen killer who shocked a nation. Inside the mind of Elise Marbury. "I'm not sorry." The chilling words that haunted a courtroom. Elise studied the clippings with something like satisfaction. She had lost her freedom, her future, her life, eventually. But she had gained something else. Immortality. Long after she was dead, people would still be talking about her, writing about her, trying to understand her. She would live on in books and documentaries and criminal psychology textbooks. Cora Whitfield would be forgotten. But Elise Marbury would be remembered forever. Or so she told herself. Because the truth that Elise would never admit, not even to herself, was that the fame was hollow. The letters she received were from strangers who didn't know her. The journalists who wanted interviews were interested in the monster, not the person. The documentaries being made were about her crimes, not her life. Nobody loved her. Nobody missed her. Nobody would mourn her when she was finally put to death. She was famous, yes. But she was also utterly, completely alone. Sometimes, late at night, when the prison was quiet and the darkness pressed in from all sides, Elise would think about Cora. Not the murder. Not the trial. Not the headlines. Just Cora. The girl who had been her friend since second grade. Who had laughed at her jokes. Who had held her hand when she cried. Who had believed in her, trusted her, loved her unconditionally. The only person who had ever really seen her. And Elise had destroyed her. Not because Cora had wronged her. Not because she deserved it. But because Elise couldn't stand to see someone else succeed. Couldn't stand to be second place. Couldn't stand the idea that anyone might be more loved, more admired, more valued than her. In those dark, quiet moments, something would stir inside Elise. Something that felt almost like regret. But then morning would come, and the sunlight would creep through her tiny window, and the feeling would fade. And Elise would go back to writing her letters. Collecting her clippings. Building her legend. Because that was all she had left. Detective Marcus Cole retired 6 months after the trial ended. He had given 30 years to the Willowbrook Police Department. 30 years of long hours, cold cases, and sleepless nights. The Marbury case was his last, and by far his most difficult. On his final day, his colleagues threw him a small party in the break room. Cake, coffee, awkward speeches. He smiled through all of it, shook hands, accepted the gold watch they gave him as a retirement gift. But when he got home that night, he sat alone in his living room and stared at the wall for a long time. On his desk was a photograph. Cora Whitfield. He had kept it throughout the investigation, throughout the trial, throughout the appeals. A reminder of why he did this job. A reminder of the girl who deserved justice. He picked up the photo and studied it. "We got her, kid," he said quietly. "We got her." He set the photo down and leaned back in his chair. The case was closed. The killer was caught. Justice had been served. But somehow, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a tragedy that everyone had lost. And what about Gregory Marbury? The man who had built his career defending the indefensible. The man who had raised a monster without ever seeing what she really was. Gregory resigned from his law firm 3 weeks after the sentencing. He couldn't take the stares, the whispers, the colleagues who suddenly found excuses to avoid him, the clients who no longer trusted him with their cases. His reputation, his legacy, was destroyed. Not because he had done anything wrong, but because his name was now synonymous with something monstrous. He sold the house in Willowbrook and moved to a small condo in another state. Changed his phone number. Stopped giving interviews. Disappeared from public life entirely. Sometimes, late at night, he would take out an old photo album and look at pictures of Elise as a child. As a toddler learning to walk. As a kindergartner on her first day of school. As a little girl with blonde pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. And he would wonder, when did it start? When did she become what she was? Was it something he did? Something he failed to do? Was there a moment, a single crucial moment, when he could have saved her? He would never know. And that uncertainty would haunt him for the rest of his life. As for Elise's mother, Margaret, she never recovered. The rehabilitation facility helped with the drinking. But it couldn't fix the shame, the guilt, the devastating knowledge that she had raised a killer and never seen it coming. She died of a stroke 18 months after the trial. Gregory didn't attend the funeral. Neither did Elise. And so the story ends. Not with a bang, but with an echo. The echo of Cora's last word, Elise, spoken in terror as she fell into darkness. The echo of a gavel falling in a courtroom, sealing a monster's fate. The echo of a mother's grief, still raw after all this time. The echo of a name that would live in infamy, long after the person who bore it was gone. There's a lesson in this story. Maybe you've already figured it out. Maybe you're still piecing it together. But here it is, plain and simple. Monsters don't always look like monsters. They don't lurk in shadows or wear their evil on their faces. They don't announce themselves with thunder and lightning. They don't make it easy to spot them. Sometimes, monsters look like the girl next door. Sometimes, they look like your best friend. Sometimes, they sit beside you in homeroom, borrow your notes, laugh at your jokes, and tell you everything is going to be okay. And by the time you see them for what they really are, it's already too late. Cora Whitfield was 17 years old when she died. She had dreams, plans, a future that was stolen from her by someone she trusted completely. She didn't deserve what happened to her. Nobody does. But her story, her real story, isn't about the way she died. It's about the way she lived. The kindness she showed. The lives she touched. The legacy she left behind. Because that's what matters in the end. Not the monsters who try to destroy us, but the love we give, the people we help, the light we bring into the world. Cora Whitfield was that light. And even though she's gone, her light still shines. So the next time someone tells you that the world is full of darkness, remember this. For every Elise Marbury, there's a Cora Whitfield. For every monster hiding behind a mask, there's someone brave enough to tear that mask away. For every tragedy, there's a mother who refuses to give up. A detective who fights for justice. A community that comes together to say, this is not okay. This will not stand. The darkness is real. But so is the light. And in the end, the light always wins. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I know it wasn't easy. I know there were moments that made you uncomfortable, made you angry, made you want to look away. But you didn't. You stayed. And that means something. If this story moved you, if it made you think, made you feel, made you want to hold your loved ones a little closer, then I have one last favor to ask. Share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be struggling with their own darkness. Someone who might need a reminder that they're not alone. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories to tell. More truths to uncover. More lessons to learn. I'll be here, waiting. Until next time. Monsters don't always lurk in shadows. Sometimes, they sit beside you in homeroom. Sometimes, they smile. And sometimes, they tell you exactly what they are. You just have to listen.